Lemkin Solitaire and Equalizer seeders and planters offer disruptive innovation like vertical banding, dry and or liquid onboard fertilizer, and great prices. Go to lemkindemo.com for more information and to request a demo.
I'm Shaun Haney, and this is RealAg on the Weekend. Let's get real and get connected with the week that was in Canadian agriculture. RealAg on the Weekend starts now. Welcome to RealAg on the Weekend here on 650 CKOM and 980 CJME. I'm your host, Shaun Haney of RealAgriculture.com. It is great to be with you here on today's program. Lots happened this week, and a lot is expected to happen over the course of the weekend here. Of course, a lot of Canadians are waiting. At the time of the recording of this show, we have not had the election call yet, but likely coming. And we're going to have an election at the end of April, potentially, is how it would kind of time out, roll out. And we're going to talk about the election here at the back end of the show. It's a dead heat. And in fact, maybe not even a dead heat. A Liberal lead at this point. The Liberals are ahead, according to several of the polls. The momentum definitely continues. Speaking of Liberals, this week, well, I guess it was the end of last week, we had a new Canadian Ag Minister, Kody Blois, was named in that role. And this week on the RealAg Radio podcast, had a chance to talk to him. It's a change of pace. You know, if you're used to the past 10 years, Marie-Claude Bobeau and Lawrence Macaulay, this is a change of pace for you. Okay, and I want your feedback on what you hear from Minister Blois. We're also going to have a product spotlight with economics. Mike Howell will be here as well. If you have any feedback on today's program, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Let's get started with my conversation with the new Minister of Agriculture, Kody Blois. Minister Blois, it is great to chat with you.
Shaun, it's always a privilege to jump on the show. You do a great job highlighting the issues. And like you said, I'm no stranger, but to your listeners out there, really pleased to talk about the portfolio, a lot going on in the world and what we're trying to get done.
Yeah, so we're going to get into some of those issues. But first, I want you to kind of reintroduce yourself to the audience. Give us some of your background. Just,
Sure.
who is Kody Blois?
Look, I proudly serve the constituency of Kings Hants in rural Nova Scotia in the Annapolis Valley in Hants County. Dad drove a truck. Mom's an administrative assistant. I don't come from a political family per se, but I jumped into this. I'm a former athlete, draft pick of the Halifax Mooseheads. So for most of your listeners, OHL or WHL equivalent in the maritime provinces. So, I'm a sport guy at heart. Big country music fan. And look, I got into politics because I wanted to give back to my community. And so I had started a couple different not-for-profits. I have a Master of Management in Public Administration. I was practicing law before my predecessor, Scott Bryson. Some may remember his name. Yep. He decided to step down in 2019 from Prime Minister Trudeau's cabinet, and the seat opened, and I've had the privilege of serving for the last 6 years as the MP. Now, for those listeners that may not know Nova Scotia agriculture well, Kings Hants is the most important agricultural hub, I'll say, certainly Nova Scotia, but I would say Atlantic Canada as well. Smaller in comparison to some of the big provinces out west and Ontario, but we're important in a regional context. And so I have a lot of touch points. I have a lot of farmers in my riding. They have been very good to educate me, to engage with me about their needs over the last 6 years. And on the parliamentary side, I was the chair of the House of Commons Standing Committee since 21. So, that's a great way to get a sense of the national stakeholders, the national issues. And then I had the privilege of serving as the parliamentary secretary for just a short period before Mr. Carney put my name up for cabinet.
So what did you try to accomplish over the weekend? I saw a bunch of social media posts. You were making some calls and doing some things. What were the key priorities over the weekend? You became minister on Friday, so working fast.
Look, we had a full, very productive day on Friday, Saturday. I let my team have a little bit of downtime on Sunday morning, but I know I have a short window here. There's a lot of uncertainty around what could be an election coming down the line. The Prime Minister has been very clear. We can't control the external events on, the geopolitics of the world. We're dealing with a U.S. administration that is far more hostile in the trading relationship than, perhaps ever, or certainly recently. I know the impacts are very real on producers because of Chinese tariffs, and we can talk about that. But this is a difficult time. So we have to control what we can control in this country. My message to my deputy minister on day one, I want a list of things on Monday morning on my desk that are non-cost in nature, that are things that industry has been raising, that we ought to be able to get done with the proper focus and the drive that is necessary, and the culture that I'm looking to establish here. My deputy minister has been great, and the civil servants and I've got a great ministerial team. We are focused on what we can get out the door in the time that we have remaining that are concrete measures to support farmers. And some of this is red tape. Look, your audience. Big programs are important. We can talk about tariff support and kind of what we're trying to do within that bailiwick. But sometimes farmers just go, get the hell out of my way. Get the red tape out of the way. Let's find ways to be more efficient. Let's find ways for the regulatory cooperation to happen quicker. And that is the message I'm signaling. I'm very close to having some things that I think the sector will really like and support. You might have to have me back on the show on Friday. We'll see what we were able to get through. But, we're getting some things done quickly that I think the sector is going to really appreciate. And of course, we're dealing with the situation of the uncertainty where I know there's a lot of stress out there in the agriculture community because of the uncertainty.
Yeah, a lot of talk about interprovincial trade barriers being this low-hanging fruit for Canada, but that's easier said than done. Like, for example, what I keep on hearing is one of the hang-ups on interprovincial trade barriers being dropped is something like supply management, creating an issue and preventing that. So what are some areas that we can really tackle when it comes to reducing some of those trade barriers internally?
Well, some of this, a lot of this is being driven by the provinces. I'm the federal minister of agriculture. And so we have a role to help convene provinces and territories to focus on those efforts. I had a conversation, for example, with Minister Morrow from my home province of Nova Scotia yesterday. He was asking about beet inspection. Those are conversations that we can look at. We got to be careful, though, because not all provinces are actually aligned in terms of what their standards are. And so we don't want to compromise the strong integrity that we have. But my job will be to, I've had conversations with nearly all of my FPT ministers so far to make sure we have an open line of communication. Minister Freeland is now responsible for that file on internal trade. I know it'll be a focus of hers. Depending on the commodity group, Shaun, some that the interprovincial play that are much more external and export focused, this is not nearly as much of a concern. I've got a wine and grape industry down in Nova Scotia. It'd be the same in BC and Niagara. It'd be a lot nicer if we could get those Nova Scotia wines to Ontario and those good Ontario wines to Nova Scotia. Those are some things that I think we can do. But it's creating a culture. My job, Shaun, as the minister, is to come in. We have 30,000 people at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada in our requisite agencies. They do tremendous work. I'm proud of them. We sent out a message today from the minister, or I guess it was maybe yesterday, and I just wanted to give, and we'll make sure we share it with you and your team, but it's about leading with saying, how do we be focused concretely on the economic outcomes, the reduction of red tape, getting things done? And we are going to really focus on that. You know that I've been a champion around registration of farm products and how we can do things. More to be said on that soon. I'm hoping there's going to be some things that your audience is really going to like. But we're pushing it. And I want to have a change agenda mandate in this department. When I sat down with Prime Minister Carney, one of the things that he said to me is he said, if we want to have the best growth in the G7 and we want to be the strongest economy, which has been his central message, he said agriculture has to be at the heart of that. With all due respect to our outgoing Prime Minister, I don't know if we ever heard that level of messaging. You're going to hear more from Prime Minister Carney about the way that we can use our natural resources, our agriculture sector, the endowments that we have as a country to drive economic success. And we have to. We're in a moment that it really matters.
We're going to have more of my conversation with the new Minister of Agriculture, Kody Blois, when we come back. You're listening to RealAg on the weekend here on 650 CQM and 980 CJME. If you're serious about agriculture, RealAg's got you covered.
For over 10 years, we've listened to and shared what producers have to say about everything from policy to agronomy from coast to coast.
Keep up with the latest in Canadian agriculture at RealAgriculture.com through daily newsletters and check out our YouTube channel.
Thanks for joining us in the RealAg community as we continue to cover and serve North American agriculture.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
FP Genetics brings new seed genetics to Canadian farms, empowering growers to thrive in ever-changing conditions. Visit fpgenetics.ca and join thousands of Canadian growers who trust FP Genetics to deliver innovative, reliable seed genetics season after season. Experience the next wave.
Really hope over the weekend here we're talking about some serious stuff here with the Minister of Agriculture. I hope you're enjoying things like March Madness on TV. We got the hockey regular season kind of winding down. Good sports weekend. Let's continue my conversation with the Minister of Agriculture, Mr. Kody Blois. One of our challenges, though, we cannot do that without trade. And we're having a hard time finding some dancing partners. We got challenges with the U.S., obviously the issues now were ongoing issues, I would say, that have been ramped up with China. Prime Minister Carney was just in France on Sunday, meeting with Macron, and he was Macron was talking about, hey, we need trade, we need free trade agreements. Well, France hasn't even ratified the CETA agreement that was signed back in 2016. How do we make agriculture really the integral component of increasing Canada's productivity and GDP if we don't have really great trading relationships?
Well, look, you hit it on the head to a certain extent. I'll meet you in the middle somewhere there, Shaun. I mean, Canada is the only country in the G7 that has a trading relationship with all other G7 countries. It would be important for me to compliment Minister McCauley and his work. He spent a lot of time in the Indo-Pacific trying to build those markets, which are particularly important for Western producers. We have access to markets. But again, the thing I have heard loud and clear in the 6 years that I've been a parliamentarian, one thing to have it on paper, a different thing to have it concretely. And so the conversations I had with the president of the CFIA yesterday were, how can we get into the nitty-gritty of making sure that we actually are working very closely with the regulatory agencies in those areas to further drive cooperation? The markets are one thing. The businesses, the farmers, the exporters, they'll take care of that. It's about government and regulations and the regulatory authorities working closer, more harmonized, and getting out of the way so that we can make sure there's that trade back and forth. So those were concrete conversations. We had the Minister of Agriculture for Ireland here yesterday in Ottawa. I guess it was the Minister of State, but still works with Minister Hayden from Ireland. And again, it was something I raised on CETA. They haven't ratified it, but what I understand to be true is that the actual trading implication is aligned with CETA. It's more of a political formality at this point. But yes, these are the things that we have to do. Now, to your listeners, the Prime Minister has gone to Europe in the time that he has remaining potentially before a RIP period. Opposition parties are talking about taking us down. Maybe the Prime Minister will choose to go to the Governor General himself. We don't know that. But we have a short window. He chose to go to Europe. My message to your listeners, Shaun, is we also understand the importance of the Pacific. We understand the importance of the Indo-Pacific and partners there. I am acutely aware of the importance of the Chinese market to our exporters, particularly in Western Canada and our farm producers. And the first call I had when I was the minister, we were in the car, we went from Rideau Hall, we're over to our first cabinet meeting. My first call was to Minister Harrison in Saskatchewan for two reasons. One, they're dealing with major issues. Canola oil, canola meal, that's a big part of the Saskatchewan prairie economy. I get it. I wanted to have conversations right away about what we can do and make sure there was an open line of communication. The second piece, as the Minister of Agriculture, I have to be a federal champion for Western Canada. That is part of what I want to bring to the table. I'm a Nova Scotian. I'm a Maritimer, proud to be from the province. I'm the first Nova Scotian to ever be the Minister of Agriculture at the federal level, which is something I take great pride in. I'm also the youngest minister in the history of this country in this portfolio. But I want to make very clear to your audience, which I know is Western-based heavily, that I care about the industry, that I'm cognizant on the China dynamic and the United States. What I will say is I am feeding in information to Minister Joly and Minister LeBlanc. It's a very delicate situation. I don't want to come on this call and be disingenuous that, I have a crystal ball or that we can solve these things overnight. But those are dialogues that we're having because it is a very difficult situation where we have two major superpowers in the world that are in that frankly, the relationship is tense. And we have tariffs in place. I know long term that is not sustainable. We are going to have to find our pathway forward as a country. But part of my job is to recognize that I know that impact, that I'm cognizant of it, and I'm finding ways that we can contribute on the commodity considerations, whether or not they are more Europe-based, United States, or in the Pacific or with China. I'm aware of it, and I'm contributing even if you're not necessarily seeing it.
Yeah, right at the conclusion of the Biden administration, they rolled out a package passing approval of $9.7 billion in farm support payments because of some of the market losses in the back end of 2024 on that crop year. They're talking as well about a new market facilitation program here in 2025. Do you support this idea of providing financial assistance, ad hoc programming to producers impacted by the market losses on things like canola, peas, pork?
Of course I do. There's a couple of considerations, though, that Shaun, that your audience needs to understand. Parliament is scheduled to come back on Monday. We just talked about the uncertainty about whether or not a federal election will come before that, or if the opposition parties bring us down, if Parliament were to go back and not actually support the speech from the throne. So we are living within the existing authorities of the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. So we have our business risk management programs, which, by the way, I've had conversations with my deputy minister and my team to say, how do we make sure that we can stretch and do everything possible within those authorities to make sure that there is support for farmers in the short term? I had a conversation with Justine Hendricks yesterday from FCC. They do good work. They have set aside $1 billion of supports. Now, I know your listeners are going to say, look, Minister, loan capital is only so good. If we get in this long situation, we can't just keep racking up debt without having the ability to kind of balance the whole piece. I get that. So my message is I'm aware of that. The other piece is if we find ourselves into a very difficult situation in April, or this continues to escalate, and there is countervailing duties where the monies are being collected by the government, there will be an ability to distribute those back to a variety of different stakeholders. Obviously, as the Minister of Agriculture, I'll be having my elbows up at the cabinet table to make sure that that is going out, but we're not there yet, right? And we're living within our appropriations as a government right now. But yes, my commitment is that we would be doing things to make sure that we soften the blow. I'm looking at every tool available in my toolkit right now. I've had the conversation with the provinces and territories. We're hoping that, our deputy minister and our team, we can explore all flexibilities. Now, Shaun, it's important to recognize it's not just my purview. This is a provincial Fed-Prov cooperation. So if we try to move something on the federal side, we're going to need buy-in from the provinces and territories. So to be determined. I will try to do whatever I can and have something to show on this side. And again, my deputy minister has actually said we've already done some things on this side. As I get briefed up, that is an absolute priority point, because we want to do everything we can. Of course, I could talk about advanced payment program back up to the $250,000. I don't say that, as in it being a silver bullet, because by the way, the message that we have to send here, this is going to be difficult. We're not going to have the tools to be able to solve all issues, but I am going to be focused every single day, every minute, to make sure that we're doing everything we can, both on supports on the tariff related impact and the geopolitical challenges, but also in-house. What can we do to get rid of things that are redundant regulations, that are old regulations, that are unnecessary bureaucratic stuff that is just a pain in the butt for our agriculture community? I am going to be deeply focused on that question.
We've been talking today to the new Minister of Agriculture, Kody Blois, and of course with the potential election call, could be the minister after the election. Might not, because it may be a conservative government, but this has been a lot of fun. I've been getting great feedback on this conversation. So if you have any feedback, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. When we come back, we got a product spotlight with economics, and then we'll finish up with the rest of my conversation with the Minister of Agriculture, Kody Blois. We'll be right back here on RealAg on the Weekend right after this. RealAg Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday, we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire, and we'll wrap things up Fridays with the RealAg Issues panel with Kelvin Hepner and Lindsay Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern, and don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada. Is a paid-for product spotlight by Nutrien and Economics.
Joining me now from Nutrien, it's Mike Howell, senior agronomist, and of course, host of the Dirt podcast. How are you, Mike?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
I'm doing well. It's wonderful to speak to you. Of course, we hear lots about your podcast. It's always nice to chat as well. Now, it is spring, thankfully, and top of mind, of course, nutrient management. So how should growers prioritize which nutrients are applied this year?
Well, anytime we make nutrient management decisions, we really like to have a current soil test in place. This is something that even at this late date, it's still not too late to get it done. Most labs can turn these results around within a couple of days, and you know exactly what your field's looking like in terms of nutrient management. Things have been tough in the farming world the last few years. A lot of producers have cut back on a lot of their major nutrients. So we need to make sure we know what's actually available for the plants this coming growing season. So we like to start that off with a good soil test. Once we get the results back from this soil test, we can pick out individual nutrients that may need attention and address those concerns after that.
Now, really good point, right? Is that especially as, we're double checking every dollar that's spent and looking at ROI and those sorts of things. Some farmers are going to decide, maybe it's a maintenance year versus a building year for certain things. But how can growers manage those nutrients more sustainably to make the most of that fertilizer investment, make every dollar count?
Well, here again, it goes back to your soil test. We need to look at those results, see what nutrients are in good supply. Some nutrients we may have enough to get through this year and not have to put those out. Some nutrients are going to be in that low range, and we need to address those at this time. We don't need to let those nutrient levels get too low. But we also need to make sure we've got a good balance of these nutrients. Make sure everything we need is there and in the proper amounts. If we do that, we're going to be able to keep producing good crops on these soils for a long period of time. We just don't need to get below that critical level and be needing something that crop's going to need to actively produce that crop.
Okay, so Mike, this is a really good point that you've hit on, and I think this is one of those factors that can sometimes, requires a bit of planning and think through. And you mentioned there, of course, yes, we can look at each individual, but we really have to think about nutrients as they work together. So why is that so important to look at a nutrient plan based on all the nutrients, not just perhaps the levels of each individual one?
Well, we have a lot of data that shows how much of each individual nutrient are required for that plant to grow and complete its life cycle. That's going to be a different amount for each nutrient. But what a lot of people miss is the interaction that goes on between different nutrients. Sulfur and nitrogen is a really good one. You have to have the correct ratio of sulfur and nitrogen to make those two nutrients perform at their best, make that plant respond like it needs to. So we need to make sure we have the proper ratio of those. Nutrient and phosphorus are also two nutrients that work hand in hand. So we need to make sure we have the right balance of those two as well. And there's many examples of this. We just need to make sure that we have all the nutrients in the right proportions, and we should be okay. We also don't want to skip over our pH. That's something that's really critical that a lot of people kind of tend to ignore. But we need to make sure we have that pH in the proper range for these nutrients to be most available for the crop.
Absolutely. Now, This is, of course, a huge decision to make every year, and how you're going to plan for nutrients and for fertilizer. Where can growers go, and their advisors, of course, to find the latest in crop nutrition information to really dig into that ROI question on fertility this year?
We always like to recommend that people check out their local extension service. That's always a great source of information for local information. Also want to put in a plug for our website. That's nutrien-economics.com. We have on that website, we've got a lot of tools that growers can use to help determine their ROI. We've got a lot of research articles that are linked to that from your state research programs. We've got a lot of calculators there. We have a nutrient removal calculator. We've got an ROI calculator, a lot of useful tools on that website that growers can use. We've got an Ask the Agronomist feature. So if you've got a question on your local farm, you can type out a question there, and I'll get that, or one of my counterparts will get that question, and we can get you an answer back on that pretty quickly. And all of this is free. It's an open website. Anybody can use that. There's also a link there to our weekly podcast called The Dirt. On there, we have industry experts from all over the world coming on and talking about agronomy and soil fertility related issues. Really good podcast. Really want everybody to check that out as well.
Yeah, we are approaching when you're going to have plenty of windshield time to be listening to those podcasts. So get subscribed, get them downloaded. All right, Mike, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
It was my pleasure. I really appreciate it.
When we come back here on RealAg on the weekend, we're going to finish up my conversation with the new Minister of Agriculture, Kody Blois. You're listening to 650 CKOM and 980 CGME, RealAg on the weekend.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
Oxbow is the latest innovation from New Farm. A versatile broadleaf in-crop herbicide powered by Duplosan technology, Oxbow is your workhorse on resistant kochia and other tough weeds.
Let's continue the discussion we've been having with the new Minister of Agriculture, Kody Blois, out of Kings Hants, Nova Scotia. Longtime proponent and champion of agriculture, really not only for the Maritimes, Central Canada, Eastern Canada, and has been out to the prairies lots. And let's finish up the discussion, and then I've got some thoughts heading into the election call.
You know, I was just on with Minister Lamontagne. Every region of the country has a different perspective on this as well. Like, you know, you talk to a certain minister, you're talking to Harrison. Look, we got to go feed the world. If you're in the Atlantic, it's a bit of a both. How do we build up local food security, and how do we make sure, you know, our horticulture, our apples are going to the U.S.? We're highly reliant on the U.S., which is, we've had conversations about what we can do elsewhere. Talk about PI potatoes, for example. How do we find different markets? But it's a mixture. Quebec, again, very focused on how they can build up that local food security within the province. I respect that. That's important. There's also an exporting aspect to this. So each province and region has a different view. My job as the federal minister is to work through that and try to make sure that we have concrete measures that each part of the country feels as though we're coming along with this together. But trade diversification, those two words are things that people want to hear in Western Canada. We're committed to it. Obviously, if we were to go an election in the next couple weeks, I will have a role on a platform as the minister responsible. I'll have an ability to have a pen on that. Those are going to be big focus areas for our party. Shaun, while we have the time, because I know you only have so much, always happy to come on here with your audience. I want to talk about carbon pricing, and I want to talk about clean fuel standards. So the first act that Prime Minister Carney did, first act of office, the cabinet, removed the consumer carbon price. This is good news for farmers. Now, you know, in my job, and we didn't talk to your audience, but that I fought very hard against Prime Minister Trudeau to get changes to that policy because I fundamentally felt it was not meeting the needs of rural Canada. Yes, we want to have environmental progress. God, any Canadian should, there's challenges out there. But right now on the depth list, it is economic security, it's defense, political and economic sovereignty. How do we, it is fifth or sixth at least on the depth list. But I think Canadians still want a government that's focused on it. I fully applaud that the Prime Minister took this measure. This will be relief, particularly on the natural gas and propane. Your listeners will know on-farm fuels for diesel and gas were already exempt for marked fuels on farm, but natural gas and propane, the last government had missed that. It was too bad. I don't want to sound too partisan. It was too bad that the Conservatives filibustered their own bill on C234, that we didn't get that through, but now we have that measure. In April, the checks that do go back to the agriculture community will continue, as will to the checks to small businesses, which is important, but the price signal is eliminated. That's really important. Poilievre now wants to get rid of the industrial price, and he wants to replace it with more government spending to reduce emissions. I'm going to be honest with your audience. I think it's a foolhardy idea, and here's why. The industrial carbon price is actually a tremendous opportunity for the agriculture sector. I had this conversation with Prime Minister Carney because he has been talking about, look, we're going to keep the industrial price, but we're going to widen the scope of how the large emitters can actually reduce their emissions and show that. So right now it's relatively limited. It's a trading system, Suncor between Irving, Algoma Steel between, what other large emitter. It doesn't allow it to go out. And so the Prime Minister has talked a lot about hybrid vehicles, EV vehicles, heat pumps, things that you can get credits for that the companies could actually say, well, look, Shaun Haney bought a heat pump in his house. God, we're going to give him $100 for that because that's what the credit's worth. And that will actually reduce our emissions. Well, what a great opportunity for agriculture. And I've said to the Prime Minister, as part of his plan on the industrial price, which is still very crucial, we have to link it to the very good work that agriculture and farmers do every single day in this country. By Poilievre cutting that, we miss that opportunity to make that connection. But also the thing he's not talking about is economists will say the industrial price was doing the heavy lifting on the emission reduction. So how many billions and billions of taxpayer dollars is a Pierre Poilievre-led government going to have to invest to get to the same outcome that, frankly, a price on pollution or a price on carbon, which is inherently a small c conservative mechanism? That is conservative ideology at its core. So I don't know why Poilievre wants big government programs, and how much are we going to have to pay for that to have the hundreds of billions of dollars of new ITCs? Now, look, there has to be a mix, and our government did do some stuff on the ITC, but to put all your eggs in that basket is ludicrous because it's undermining the canola crush. It's undermining the ability for some of the biofuel sector, which is we have to focus on more. Last is on clean fuel standards. And you can have Barlow to come in and dispute this. This is fine. I'm not trying to be too partisan. I want your audience to understand the mechanism because I'm not ideological. I just want to be pragmatic about how we can actually do some good on the environment, but also create economic outcomes for our agriculture sector. Clean fuel standards. The Conservatives are proposing to cut that. Might sound good out in the streets in the suburbs, but I don't think it's good news for our canola farmers. It's not good news for our oil grain folks. The biofuel sector has tremendous potential in this country. Cutting the clean fuel standard actually reduces the demand side that we need in this country at a moment that, frankly, we're dealing with uncertainty in China. We're dealing with uncertainty in the United States. No, we should actually be wanting to do more on that. So where are our Conservative MPs in Western Canada? Why are they not telling Pierre Poilievre this is not good policy? We should want to be creating that demand side. Anyways, I don't want to sound too partisan. Shaun, this is a good, but for me, beyond politics, this is the kind of stuff we got to be rooted on, and we got to get outcomes. That is my focus as a minister, is on outcomes, demonstrating that we're moving the needle and creating a culture that we're getting it done here in Ottawa.
Do you see, right now we've got that on the consumer carbon tax that's been moved to zero. That legislation is still in place. Is the Carney government intending to
absolutely? And again, I don't want to come across, but I saw the Conservatives flailing on the weekend that we had a little Mark Carney sign off on the Prime Minister signing off on the paper. What has been done, because Parliament is not sitting and the government wanted to move as quickly as possible, it's an order in council to move the price signal to zero with an intention that a Carney-led government, if that happens, God willing, in my view, if it happens, that we will absolutely, our first act of Parliament will be to eliminate the legislation, but that was the tool that was available to the government in the time. I hope your audience appreciates the urgency that the government took on it. And I know it's a change agenda. Look, I know that the last prime minister was very hell-bent on keeping that price. Kudos to Mark Carney and the prime. Well, I get used to calling him the prime minister. Hopefully that'll be long term. But Mark Carney, and under his leadership, that was his first act. And he's signaled it's good for farmers. It's good for our small business. And what we would replace the rebates in, by the way, Shaun, because the Conservatives never talked about the fact that the money did go back. Households did get those rebates. Lower and middle income households, actually, it was an important economic measure. The prime minister is proposing middle income tax cuts to offset that. So I think there's a very thoughtful approach here. And
I got one more question, because I know we both got to go. Have you chatted with USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins yet?
We're making those connections. We're doing our outreach because we know it's extremely important. And in fact, some of the things that I've talked to my department is, can you give me a list of things that we can actually cooperate on? The Prime Minister, though, I do think this is important because, yes, that engagement will happen. But the relationship has been very strained. And frankly, it's been disrespectful. And Prime Minister Carney has made very clear, I'm willing to go to Washington. I'm willing to engage with the U.S. administration when there is an element of respect to how important that partnership is. And so we are making that outreach. Whether or not that's going to happen the next day or two, I'm not exactly sure. But of course, the Americans are a very crucial partner. I have a great relationship with G.T. Thompson, who's the House chair with the Republicans. I have great respect for John Bozeman, who is the senator from Arkansas, who's the Republican chair in agriculture. Two great gentlemen. And we've made outreach with those departments. But again, I think the Prime Minister is saying we have to start from a basis of relationship respect here. And we have to get this back on the rails. It's been strained. So how do we do that? If the U.S. administration, can drop the stuff on the 51st state, can drop the stuff on trying to tariff their most important partner and actually look at a North American economy, there's a lot of merit there. So we'll take that into consideration as we're also engaging with our counterparts.
Kind of had a bit of a takeover today. A lot of times we have different conversations and lots of different interviews. And I thought I wanted to take some time to introduce you to the Minister of Agriculture. And like I said, we're not sure how long Mr. Blois will be the minister. Of course, post-election, it could be him. It also could be somebody else if the Conservatives win. I guess the Liberals, if they were to win, they could have somebody else as well. But he's definitely trying to hit the ground running. And, short time to get anything done, basically a week. But this is a job that he's craved and wanted and wanted to be the guy. No different than John Barlow looks for the Conservatives to win, and he wants to be. I am sure the Minister of Agriculture has been the shadow minister for the Conservatives for quite some time. And listen, we have moved from a 25-point lead, roughly, for the Conservatives 3 months ago to now it's a 5-point lead for the Liberals. That's like a 30-point swing. And even if you say it's 25, whatever. This is either one of the greatest political comebacks or one of the greatest political tankings of all time. And what is so interesting is the fact that it is so driven from something outside of the country. It's not China. It's not India. It's what's happening in the United States. It is President Donald Trump that has pushed the direction that Canadians are willing to go politically. Conservatives are scrambling, trying to find something that'll resonate with Canadians. Canadians are saying, we think the Conservatives are just going to roll over to Trump. We think that Carney is going to fight for Canadians. That's a perception. This week, President Trump said he prefers dealing with the Liberals. He doesn't like the Conservative leader. What 2025 is fascinating. Another piece of this that is really fascinating is how Canadians, we went from where they wanted change, Trudeau out, Poilievre in, to where it's essentially like 87% the same cabinet that Carney has around him, and he is propelling himself in the polls. Canadians not as interested in change as maybe they thought, which has a lot of people really frustrated on the Conservative side of the aisle. Wait a minute, we just had 10 lost years, and now we want maybe 4 more or 5 more of the same thing? It's very confusing right now politically for a lot of Canadians to sort out where they land on all of this. I want to know where you land on it. What did you hear that you liked or disliked in my discussion with Kody Blois? And what about the election? What are your thoughts on what happens here in the next basically 5 weeks. Want your thoughts? Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Thanks so much for tuning in to Real Ag on the Weekend here on 650 CQM and 980 CGME.